All right, so everybody, thanks so much for listening to our podcast. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, whatever podcast site you're listening to us, thanks so much. We greatly appreciate it. We have a good author on here today, and he's going to be talking about some amazing medical issues that have been going on for quite some time. So we're going to talk about the good parts of it and the bad parts. But he did write a book that came out yesterday on January 4th. We're taping this on the 5th. This is Peter Boni, and he did author the new book. As I said, it came out yesterday, Uprooted. Definitely check it out. So, Peter, first of all, before we even get into the book, thanks for coming on. Greatly appreciate your time today.
Appreciate the platform. Thank you.
All right. So, Peter, tell the viewers a little bit about you in general.
Well, how did I get to be the person I am? Okay, today I consider myself an author and an advocate for the donor conceived. But how did I get that way? I think these three things. I look back at my background. I've dysfunctional childhood. I was in 11 different schools between the first and the ninth grade, lots of moving around with a sick dad. Number one, a state college education. Number two, and on-the-ground military service as a special operations team leader in Vietnam that sort of shaped my leadership style. But what about my DNA? I always took that for granted. In 1995, I was 49 years old. I was the CEO of a high-tech company in hot water. My 75-year-old mother had an open heart surgery and a post-surgical stroke, and all of the locks that guarded her secret just no longer worked. And it came out that I was conceived by a anonymous sperm donor with the help of a Harvard Medical School professor who had a fertility practice in the waning days of World War II. The dad that I thought was my dad was sterile. So this was obviously a very disruptive experience for me. I had mixed emotions on that. My dad was sick when I was a child, and he took his own life when I was 16. The oldest school Italian family covered that up and didn't want to talk about it. They considered it flawed, let it not show on them. And I grew up thinking maybe I'm flawed too. So I was relieved and sad. I was angry and joyous. I was shameful and proud all at the same time. Very confusing set of emotions. All I could do was search for the donor and try to find my genealogical heritage. And my mother gave me some clues. The clues were not necessarily on the mark, and I just ran into some stone walls. So I started to research the history and the evolution of assisted reproductive technology, right from the biblical references right through to today. And what I uncovered was now today a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it is an industry, and in need of a serious fix, because what it does is it enables the conception of dozens, if not 100 or more siblings, unknowing siblings from the same donor without their knowledge. Some things are right and some things are wrong.
These things out where, 23andMe and all these other things that you can look into your heritage and stuff like that. Obviously, that wasn't around in 1995. So how did you try to, or did you figure out any of this information throughout your time searching? I don't want you to give away the book, but you can try to massage that, I guess.
Well, I really researched it for 22 years, trying to find my genealogy, my genealogical health history, two, right, which was really missing. And a big question I had, I'm an only child, right? Did I have any siblings, right? Trying to find all three of those. And with erroneous clues, and there were no records. Everything was very silent and secretive during that time. All I could do was the old gumshoe methods of research. And I went to the Harvard Medical School Library of Medical History, and as well as the Boston Public Library. And I did a lot of my research there. But 23andMe came out 12 years after I found that I was donor conceived. And then Ancestry.com was another 5 years after that. So in the course of 22 years, with the help of 21st century technology, I did the 23andMe test in early 2008, and I found out what, but I didn't find out who. No paternal connection showed up on that. But I learned, okay, I was not Northern Italian, I was English, French, and a little slice of Scandinavia. Well, okay, I can live with that. But it was the Ancestry.com thing several years later that enabled me to find a close relative, in quotes, that was paternal. And that close relative bonded with me to find the source of my seed in the family tree. In my research of the history, the sociological, the scientific, and the legal history of assisted reproductive technology, you can read about that in my book, but I've got the top 10 secrets of assisted reproductive technology that many people just don't know.
Yeah, could you talk about that, Peter, the top 10 secrets for reproductive technology, assisted reproductive technology?
The first one is really artificial insemination was perfected on the farm, plants and animals, and it was perfected by an exiled mad scientist that history has nicknamed Red Frankenstein. Artificial insemination by husband was first alleged in 1462 by a medieval king. You can read about that in the book. Artificial insemination by husband was first documented at the end of the 18th century by an English surgeon who was serving the English court, serving the royal court. Artificial insemination by donor was actually, in 1884, a criminal act in a med school. You can read about that in the book. Church and state drove assisted reproductive technology and underground in the early 20th century. And the early practices of assisted reproductive technology and donor insemination actually had a eugenics overtone. Frozen bull sperm, frozen bull semen in 1953 actually spawned the entire Wild West of the gamete banks and the gamete distribution that we have today.
Wow.
Now, 21st century science has obsoleted all of those secretive practices that took place in the 20th century. Now, we already know that, but those practices are still taking place.
Right.
The fertility rates are down 50%, and the population of donor conceived people is up 50%. Now, the last secret is something that still has yet to be answered, because out there, as science continues to evolve, is another mad scientist yet to be nicknamed. There's another Red Frankenstein out there, but we hasn't nicknamed him yet. Just 2 years ago, there was a Chinese scientist that was sentenced to 3 years in jail for manipulating the genes before a child was conceived. The Chinese considered that unlawful. Now, this past year, at a research university in Australia, they were able to create a model embryo with cellular skin. No sperm, no egg. So you've got the cloning of sheep and dogs on the farm. What about the other mammal? This is, if ethical and legal regulation doesn't take place, the next Red Frankenstein is out there. We just haven't seen him yet.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about the book, again, it's Uprooted, Peter J. Boni. Again, check it out in your local bookstores. That's what we try to promote here. If you have to go to Barnes and Nobles, go there. And then we try to promote Peter Amazon last. But, you know, it is what it is. But anyways, as we move forward into the interview, Peter, careful. I want to move on to the next question. So, you know, we've kind of taught, obviously the positives of artificial insemination are, you do get to have a child and you can raise that child hopefully to be successful in life. What do you feel like are the negative points of that artificial insemination?
I'm advocating for a donor-conceived Bill of Rights.
Okay.
The donors have rights, and the recipients have rights, and sure, they have rights. But there's nothing on the books that is the right of the donor-conceived person to know and understand what his genealogy is. The donor-conceived Bill of Rights would abolish anonymity, which is abolished anyway by 21st century technology, since DNA over the internet will find any anonymous donor. The donor-conceived Bill of Rights would require genetic testing of a donor on the front end of receiving his gamete or her gamete. Today, there's no requirement for that. You take the word of the donor as opposed to do testing on the donor. And people don't tell the truth about their physical and mental state at the time of their donation. So the donor-conceived Bill of Rights would require that as well. Since there are multiple siblings born, there's no registry today of finding a sibling. How would you like to date a sibling? Or how would you like your children dating the children of your sibling? Smart kids go to smart kids schools, and you never know what might happen. I discovered a sister in February, and we didn't date, but the dots could have connected. They were close back in the day, so that's an issue. Legislation regarding restricting the number of people conceived from any one donor. Today, there is no regulation to that effect. There's a guideline by a trade association. The guideline is 25 per 800,000 population for a single donor.
Wow.
Well, that's, if I lived in Sacramento then, I'd have 25 siblings. If I were in metropolitan Boston, using that guideline, I'd have 125 siblings. So how about a larger metropolitan area? How about New York City or LA? I'd have 250 siblings. And that's if a person just donated to one bank. He or she would be free to go to several banks. So you go to 4 different banks, you've got 4 times that number. And like I stated, the rights of the donor and the rights of the recipient are all respected. But how about the rights of the donor-conceived person who is conceived as a result of this science?
Now, I agree with you 100%. So,
also, there are cases of, I'll call it fertility fraud, and no laws to dissuade or protect that. So there's no legal recourse if a doctor chose to use his own sperm on 200 of his patients.
wow.
Right? It's unethical, but it's not unlawful. It's not unlawful for a bank to mix up some sperm or provide one set of gametes as opposed to the other. It's not unlawful to take an untested gamete and provide that to a couple. So provide some laws on the books for blatant fertility fraud. There are none today.
So what do you hope when people do read the book, they get out of it?
Well, I'd like for the book to be call it the go-to book for the fertility industry at large, past, present, and future donors, recipients, fertility practitioners, medical practitioners, the legal community, the psychological counselors, and the legislators. Let that be a de facto go-to book. Number one, positively impact the practice of assisted reproductive technology. And then perhaps speak to the feelings and the well-being of all people that are misattributed. Misattributed, by the way, was a word that I never really knew up until I did my research. I knew other miswords, misconceived, misunderstood, misnomer, but never misattributed. Misattributed means that your DNA and your birth certificate just don't jive. Something is askew with one or both parents. Now, there's a few reasons for somebody to be misattributed. You're an NPE in a non-parental event. The experts think that 2 to 4% of us are misattributed. It's a pretty big number when you consider 8 billion people on the planet. How can that be? It's late discovery adoption is a leading cause. Extramarital affair, a one-night stand, or an unreported sexual assault. You could be switched at birth or raised by another family member. Aunt Martha you called mom, but really Cousin Mary was your mom. That happens in families today. Or you can be like me, conceived through an anonymous donor, a gamete donor, sperm, egg, or embryo. In the old days, they called that semi-adoption. Feelings, the conflicting feelings that come about from late discovery misattribution are almost identical. A late discovery adoptee has the same kinds of emotional responses that I might have had, or a person who is brought up and learns that they're a product of an extramarital affair. It's very disruptive to your identity.
I agree 100%. So as we finish the interview, Peter, where can people find more about you? I did tease the book that they can go and get at their local bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, wherever books are sold in general. Where can they find more about you, though?
All right, I have a website. It's www.peterjboni.com, and that has links to a variety of places to buy the book. It has my bio. You can also go on LinkedIn and get my profile on LinkedIn as well.
All right. Again, peterjboni.com. The book is Uprooted. Definitely check it out. It's worth the buy. I'm definitely about to read it. So, Peter, first of all, thanks so much for your time. It means a lot for you to come on the program and talk to the viewers, and I really appreciate it and look forward to having you on again sometime soon.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the platform.